Welcome to Saltier Politics. We have quite an episode for you this week. I'm really excited because we talk a lot of mob.
We had Elie Honig on, who is a former assistant U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York, the Justice Department. It's really a great episode, and it's rare that we are able to talk about so many different things with somebody who's an expert in so many different things.
Time flew by.
It really did, yeah. I mean, it was an unbelievable discussion, and if you are a fan of The Sopranos and or interested in Whitey Bulger and or interested in Robert Mueller and or interested in law and crime and mob and Bruce Springsteen.
In the words of Paul Manafort, bada bing, bada boom.
Welcome, Elie Honig, CNN legal analyst, former federal and state prosecutor. Used to work at the Southern District of New York, which is kind of the crown jewel of the federal prosecution business. And you're now working at Rutgers University and at Lowenstein Sandler. Let's start with the fact that it has now been a while since the election, and yet, for some reason, we've heard nothing from Robert Mueller. What do you think that's about?
So everyone's sort of going nuts asking that question. There's a lot of tea leaf reading going on. What does this adjournment mean? What does that adjournment mean? What does this signal mean? We've all been sort of at the ready every day since the election, ready for the next round of indictments to drop. It could mean a couple of things. It could just mean Mueller's just not ready. And I think we know Mueller just does things when he's damn well ready and not when anyone tells him to. It could be that the Whitaker factor is playing in here because you have a brand new AG as of the day after the election who now sits atop the Mueller investigation. So there are certain things, if you look at the regs, not to get overly legalistic, but they have to go through him. So Whitaker may have said, let me get my bearings here. Let me read up on the file before we start dropping indictments. Or he could be saying no to things that Mueller wants to do.
And how much is the train in motion? I know there's a lot, we can get into Whitaker in a second, but I know there's a lot of concern by people out there that Whitaker is going to shut the whole thing down. But it sounds like, and you used to work in the Southern District of New York as an AUSA, so you can talk about this assistant U.S. attorney. How much of the things that have already been set in motion over the last year and a half, out of Whitaker's hands?
I think the reason he's there is quite clear. He is underqualified and lower on the totem pole of DOJ than a lot of other people. I think it was conspicuous that Trump picked him. I think the reason is very clear because of the tirades he's gone on about the Mueller investigation. So that said, I don't think the plan here is let's put in Whitaker and he'll completely shut this down. I think it's let's put in Whitaker. He can moderate it. He can keep an eye on it.
Well, definitely on that plane, I have a question for you about, so Robert Mueller in his new court filing concerning Roger Stone's associate Andrew Miller testifying before a grand jury. Mueller stated that Whitaker's appointment, quote, had no effect on this case. Two points. Do you think this shows that Mueller has found a way for Whitaker to fall in line? Or do you think Mueller thinks he can win a battle against Whitaker?
The question is, what in that Andrew Miller case in the D.C. Circuit was Mueller's appointment back in 2017 legitimate or not? And the D.C. Circuit asked, well, how does it make a difference now that Whitaker's in charge? It doesn't. The question is who was in charge back then. I don't know if Mueller has forced Whitaker to fall in line or vice versa. My hope as a prosecutor and kind of a purist, I guess, is that they find a happy medium where they have a real discussion. Should we be issuing this subpoena? Should we be bringing this charge? The problem is going to happen when Mueller comes out on yes and Whitaker comes out on no. Technically, the way that gets resolved is Whitaker has the power. He can squash something. He then has to ultimately, down the line, report that to Congress. And so that becomes more relevant now that the Democrats have taken over the House. So now, look, I don't know if Mueller feels strongly enough, we could see resignations, we could see all manner of sort of escape hatches being used.
But the Southern District to me is interesting because I've always heard, and mercifully have had little to do with the federal justice system, but it's always been apparent from everybody that I've spoken to, including people in your position, that the Southern District is very independent and that they're kind of insulated from politics. And Jeff Berman, who is now the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District, is a Trump appointee, but nevertheless presides over an office that has shown to be its own kind of microcosm of a Justice Department. First of all, having worked there, is that true? And secondly, what would you expect if the Southern District got wind of the fact that they're being told by Main Justice, by Matt Whitaker and others in the Justice Department to tone it down or to not continue with an investigation that's pretty far down the road. What would you expect to see out of the Southern District, out of those professionals at the U.S. Attorney's Office?
So the Southern District is, the joke is the sovereign district of New York. Right. We are famously independent, famously pleased with ourselves. We think we're the best, just ask us. And there is historical independence there. That said, Southern District is still part of the United States Department of Justice. There are still things that you have to get approval up the line for. As independent spirited as that office is, we can't just make up our own rules. We can't just disregard DOJ protocols. And really that independence is a function largely of the leadership. I was lucky to work there under appointees of both Republicans and Democrats who were very independent. Preet Bharara, Mike Garcia, Dave Kelly, and who played very little politics and had as little to do with as possible with the Department of Justice. I'm not sure. I don't know Jeffrey Berman well enough. I believe he's recused himself off the Cohen matter. Right. So the question is, what's the leadership going to do? And I can't say I know those people now. Things turn over so quickly there well enough. But ultimately, the Southern District can't defect. The Southern District can't say we disregard you, DOJ, and we're going to do our own thing.
Would they go public ever, or is that something that office would never do?
It would be out of character.
Right.
Mueller's shop has been incredibly airtight, hasn't leaked at all. The Southern District, I think, is pretty close second in terms of not leaking. That's a strong ethic there. I don't know anyone who ever leaked out of there.
So Mueller has cooperation with Cohen, Manafort, Rick Gates, Michael Flynn. Who do you guys think is the biggest threat?
You tell me.
Well, Cohen, not necessarily yet. Cohen's still in progress. But of those, Manafort, by far. Manafort sort of hits on a lot of different areas. Like if you could do a Venn diagram, he hits all the big ones, right? He was front and center on the campaign in the key. Trump always says, he was barely involved. He was the campaign manager, chairman.
For a while.
For I think it was 5 months.
Right.
He has all these strange financial and political ties to Russia, to the Ukraine. That's what his trial was about. He was in the Trump Tower meeting. He was right in the mix when that meeting was being planned and coming about. And he has communications with all the other shady figures. So I think Manafort has sort of, when you're looking at cooperators, you want someone who has access, right? He's inner circle, and someone who has sort of a breadth of knowledge and exposure, right? What you want in a cooperator is someone who can take you inside a corrupt organization and sort of walk you through it. And I think if he cooperates, he's best positioned to do real damage.
Why have we heard nothing? Speaking of Michael Flynn, we've heard nothing from Flynn really since the indictment, except for the fact that he's still running around doing fundraisers for Republican candidates, which I think is kind of strange for somebody who's potentially cooperating and under indictment. So he's obviously not been disavowed by the Trump White House if he's still running around doing political events for Trump allies. On the other hand, he's clearly cooperating because they keep postponing his sentencing date. So what do you make of that?
I don't know. It's a weird one. You do typically want to push off your cooperator sentencing date until they're done. Until not just they're done, but until all their cooperation is done. I've had cooperators that we pushed off sentencing 5-6 years, literally, because we kept making cases off them. Obviously, that's not going to fly here. It is an unusual case. I don't know the fact that he's still sort of on the circuit is very strange. If I had a cooperator like him, I'd tell him, you're out. You're not interacting with any of these folks anymore. You're not speaking with any of these people anymore. You got to find something else to do. But they do keep putting off his sentencing. I think he's sort of faded into the role of a secondary cooperator. I think if there are going to be charges, they're going to be based off Manafort, maybe Cohen if he comes in. And then Flynn you have as maybe if you need a supporting witness for something. I don't know if that's because they don't fully trust him. I don't know if that's because they just think they don't need him anymore because they have better witnesses. It's always sort of a complicated calculus when you're juggling multiple cooperators.
It could be, potentially, and people speculate about this. I find it hard to believe that they might indict Donald Trump Jr., but anything's possible. I mean, first of all, is that something that's a potential possibility based on purely the fact that he perjured himself before Congress?
Yeah.
Is that something that people would do for somebody in his position? I mean, without anything else?
You would definitely think twice and think hard because it's the president's son, but there's no legal or technical immunity or coverage or special treatment because he's the president's son. The president does have some special legal protections that other people don't have. Executive privilege, prohibition on direct indictment, well, not prohibition, but the tendency towards not indicting. But Junior, I think, could be in trouble. I do think he's potentially in the hot seat. I think, first of all, potentially for lying to Congress, as you said. And second of all, I still think that Trump Tower meeting in June of 2016, which Manafort was in, remember the participants on the Trump side was Trump Jr., Manafort, and Jared Kushner, I still think that meeting itself could give rise to conspiracy liability for those who were in on it. So it's possible. I guarantee you Mueller would only indict if he felt like he had a headshot.
What about subpoena power? Because now that Adam Schiff is the head of the House Intel Committee, what does that mean for Trump?
Yeah. So the fact that the House flipped over to the Democrats, I think, is important, and I think it's an important backstop for Mueller, but it's highly imperfect. I think people need to have the expectations sort of properly aligned. Yes, the Democrats can now issue subpoenas, can now hold hearings, but there's a couple of big things that sort of leave that a little bit short. Number one, the House can't charge someone criminally, right? So there's kind of, you can do investigations, but to what end? The House also, the subpoena power is not as strong as law enforcement subpoena power. If the House issues a subpoena and let's say the White House resists it or claims a privilege, then you get bogged down in these long legal proceedings, and it could really stall out quickly. So the other thing I would say is I think the Democrats in the House, they're excited. They have this new power, but they need to be careful not to step on the toes of anything that the real prosecutors are doing, right? I've heard things like we're gonna call all these witnesses, we're gonna get to the bottom of Russian interference. If I'm Mueller, I'm thinking, please don't. Let me do my thing. Let me talk to these witnesses. I may have things that I need to keep confidential. I may have witnesses that I don't want out there testifying publicly before I put them in the grand jury or on the stand. So I think there needs to be a little bit of caution.
But isn't that a battle that's going to be brewing? I mean, you just laid this out, and it seems to me politically it's going to be a battle because the House Democrats may say, okay, great, we trust you, Robert Mueller, but we don't trust Matt Whitaker. We don't know what kind of constraints he's put on you. It may be that you're not going to be allowed to get to the bottom of everything that you should get to the bottom of. So we're going to take over this part of the investigation. I mean, that's setting it up to be a complete cluster. I mean,
it's a delicate dance there, and I think one thing that the House Dems would be wise to do is let this play out for a little bit, see what happens, see if Mueller resigns, right? And then that's an obvious sign they need to spring into action. So it's a dance, and it's a delicate one.
Before we get to what I think is so fascinating, which is your prosecution of the guy that killed Whitey Bulger. I just want to say we on this podcast always drink. And for some reason, every guest we've had is the bane of my existence because they like either cheap beer like Steve Kornacki or they all like brown alcohol. And you are making us drink Jack and Ginger, which I don't think
How did that become your drink?
Yeah, how did that become your drink?
I'm a terrible drinker in that I barely do it. And when I do drink, I'm not that good at it, but it's simple. And when my friends and I play cards, it's what guys do. You just, I don't know, someone has a bottle of Jack, you grab a thing of ginger ale from the bodega.
I feel like Jack's a guy drink. That's true. I don't know many women who drink Jack. That's like
the Jack and honey.
Yeah, that's horrible.
I don't know what that is. That's disgusting. That's disgusting.
It's syrup.
Yeah. That's repulsive. All right.
But I just want to say it is night. It is dark out.
It is definitely dark out, but I still stand by the fact that Jack and Ginger is, although I'm downing it because I just spent 2 hours in traffic and we're about to talk Whitey Bulger, my favorite topic. I still, I don't know. One day somebody's going to show up with vodka or something near and dear to my Russian heart. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the fact that you prosecuted the guy that allegedly murdered Whitey Bulger. When I was in Boston, Billy Bulger, Whitey Bulger's brother, was sort of the king of Boston politics. He was the Senate president, or the Senate majority leader, as they call it in Massachusetts, I think. And he had kind of a really big political fall because of the fact that people thought he protected his brother Whitey, who was this legend in Southie, which is the southern end of Boston. And I guess in addition to that, you said you were talking about people cooperating with the feds before, a big cooperator, right, with law enforcement, which protected him for many years, ironically enough.
He was an informant,
Right.
Yeah.
Tell us about the guy that killed him, because I thought you had such an interesting point about why, but you know this guy because you spent a long time prosecuting.
I tried him for 5 murders, attempted murders, and conspiracies. So Fotios Freddy Geas was a hitman for the Genovese family. He was not made, right? He's not Italian.
You have to be Italian to be made?
Yes, you do.
You can't even be like the consigliere? You can't be like, it's not
like
a Godfather thing?
Right,
yeah.
Tom Hagen.
Tom Hagen?
No.
All right.
But the Geases were, I think, Greek, but they were really, really tough guys. With the morning that it came out that Freddy Geas had allegedly killed Whitey Bulger, my phone blew up from friends from Southern District saying, wasn't this your guy? And I thought, my first thought was, oh my God, I can't believe my guy killed Whitey Bulger. My second thought was, of course it was Freddy Geas.
Right. Why?
Because he was really bloodthirsty. We ended up prosecuting a whole bunch of guys from the Genovese family. We tried 3 defendants together. It was Artie Nigro, who was the boss of the Genovese family, and then Freddie and his brother Ty. Actually, Ty was a little even more dangerous than Freddie. But that was the trial. And the case involved, the main case we charged, they had gunned down a captain, a high-ranking person, in Springfield, Massachusetts, sort of broad daylight. The Geas boys had found some crazy guy to shoot him, shot him a bunch of times and killed him. When we did the case, someone else cooperated and said, we also killed someone else and buried him in the woods. And the FBI then took this cooperator out of jail for the day, and the cooperator showed him, walked him into the woods in a town called Agawam, Massachusetts. And the cooperator said, somewhere around here, FBI dug, and there he was, Gary Westerman. He'd been missing for 7 years. They killed him. They bashed him over the head with a shovel. They dumped him in the grave, and 7 years later, we dug him up. And so we tried Artie Nigro.
Wait, and the best part is
Yep.
I read that you still found, or the feds found him still wearing his ski mask. That's just crazy.
He had his Nikes intact and his ski mask. The way they lured him into the woods is he was a bad guy too. And they said, we're going to rob this drug dealer, and in order to get into his house, we got to cut through the woods here. They get into the woods, they turn on him. They actually, a little detail that makes these cases interesting. The Geases started shooting at him, and they said the bullets bounced off his head. He wasn't dying. And then that's why they bashed him over the head with a shovel to finish him off. And sure enough, when we went out in the woods, there were shell casings from the exact right type of gun right there. 7 years later, the forensics showed that he had been bashed over the head, that he'd been shot but not penetrated through the skull. So it lined up. I got to stand in front of the jury in closing argument and say, there's this expression, does he know where the bodies are buried? And in normal life, that means, does he know what he's talking about? Does he really have the goods? In this case, the cooperator literally knew where the body was buried. So that was a very fun case to try. We convicted all 3 defendants on both of those murders. There was another attempted murder where they shot someone in the Bronx 9 times and he lived and testified for us, but he didn't know who did it. He just said 2 tall white guys. That's the Geas boys. And they all got life sentences. And I thought that would be the last I'd ever hear of Freddy Geas until he killed Whitey Bulger. Now, you're right. I am 99.9% sure Freddy Geas had never met Whitey Bulger, had anything to do with him until that day. Freddy Geas was operating in Springfield, but he was really a New York extension of the Genovese family. Bulger was a Boston mobster. Totally different ages. No reason to think they would have ever come in contact. But look, immediately I said, I know why Freddy did this. Number one, Freddy just loves the killing. They killed almost for sport. They killed for reputation. We showed the evidence in the case was when they killed Westerman, the guy they buried in the woods, it was because they felt like they weren't getting enough respect. And so we said, we gotta kill somebody. He was kind of their friend. But they wanted to raise their rep. The second thing is Freddy hates cooperators. We got him with cooperators. His former close friends turned and testified for us. And Bulger, like you said, was an informant. So I think he was sending a message.
Do you think there's a possibility that this was coming down from on high, or you think he just did it?
I don't. I'll put it this way: the only consequences to Freddy really are they could move him to a slightly higher security classification, and he could get charged again. But he's already got a life sentence. He's not getting put to death.
Right.
The feds haven't put anyone to death since 2003. And the way knowing Freddy, he would gladly take a slightly different security classification to be a prison legend.
Did you ever worry about your safety doing these trials?
No, because it wasn't good for business for them to come after me. Look, if the rule was if you kill the prosecutor, the case gets dismissed, I'd be dead 100 times over. But if they ever tried something on me, the case doesn't go away. They just plug in the next Southern District guy. And by the way, all of federal law enforcement will come down on your head. So no one ever tried anything. I wasn't scared. I always kept it business. It was never personal. There were some prosecutors like to growl at people or, I'm going to tear you apart. That wasn't my style. So. And
did you ever was there ever any fear that this was going to potentially come down the pike? I mean, you're not prosecuting low-level drug dealers, right? You're prosecuting major mobsters and other
later on. No, not really. Although I would put Freddy Geas, if you said, who do you not want to get locked in a room with for 5 minutes from the guys you prosecuted, Freddy and Ty Geas would be in that top 5.
And had he had a record before you got him, or was he?
Oh yeah, he'd been convicted. No murders. He'd been in and out. He had a troubled background, but nothing that ever kept him in for a long stretch until we got him.
So everybody I know is completely fascinated by Whitey Bulger, and he's, again, I think it's the Jack Nicholson myth. I think he's just become such a mythical figure, and I think this Freddy Geas now for the rest of his life is going to be linked to that. It's almost like a Jack Ruby situation.
I almost cringed when I saw it, and I wrote a piece about it for CNN, but I almost thought, I know Freddie's sitting in jail loving his clippings right now and loving the attention he's getting.
All right. Here's a weird fact about you, which we also always ask, which, speaking of, as a federal prosecutor, this sounds super, super sketchy, but you changed your name twice, which, again, makes me wonder what you're hiding, what you're running from.
I legally changed my name twice. My marriage certificate, they made me put an AKA on there, which really made me feel like a criminal defendant.
Does your wife know this? That's kind of
sketchy. She does. She was a little taken aback.
You didn't tell her until...
No, she knew. but when we were sitting...
Honey, I've got something to tell you. I've been on the run for 30 years.
Well, we were sitting there, and they said, have you ever been known by other names? I said, yeah. And they said, well, you have to have an AKA on there. So,
whoops.
Do you want the quick version of it?
I kind of want the interesting version of it.
So my birth name was Eliezer, after my grandfather.
Right.
A little bit of a mouthful to call a little kid, so my parents called me Ellie, constantly confused for a girl, right?
Okay.
Put in the girls' team, the girls' bunk at camp. I got a girls' soccer trophy, like with breasts and stuff. And so when I signed up to go to overnight camp, my dad, who's a lawyer, said, do you want to change it to a definite guy's name, just for signing up?
Right.
And of course, at age 10, yes. So we legally changed it to Elliot, which no one really ever called me.
Okay.
And then, except at camp. And then years later, when I became a lawyer, I asked my mom, I said, can you go dig up that file? It's from when I was 10. And so she found it, and it was like moldy. She FedExed it to me, and I went to the DC court where I was living at the time and changed it back to Eliezer. So I went from Eliezer to Elliot back to Eliezer. So
you're still Eliezer.
Yeah, I'm back to the original.
What was the moment you decided to go back to the original?
I don't know exactly. I think when I became a lawyer, I thought, I can do this myself now. Okay. And by the way, when I got the old file from when we changed it to Elliot, my dad had made me write an affidavit to the court saying, basically,
when you were 10?
I was 10, saying, I want to change my name because I don't want to get confused for a girl, and I'm not a fugitive from the law or trying to evade civil process or something.
That's
my
hilarious.
dad's careful.
That is awesome, and that is so many years of therapy. They're gonna have to work that out, and that's hilarious.
It made me stronger.
Yeah,
like a
of
boy
course,
called Sue.
of course. How did you end up doing organized crime? Is that something you fell into, or is that an interest of yours?
I'm laughing because we once did a panel at the Southern District where all the bureau chiefs spoke to the new prosecutors about why they went into their senior unit, and everyone had this inspiring stories or interesting stories. I wanted to go into securities because I've always been interested in banking and finance. I just basically said I thought it was cool.
Yeah.
I liked the movies and stuff. I knew a lot of the people who were in there, but yeah, it seemed like a thrill, right? To go after real life mobsters. People say, was it like Goodfellas? Is it like Sopranos? A lot of times it's better. And so I love the stories. I love the human drama of it. I love getting to sit down with someone who used to be in the mob, who maybe has committed murders and done horrible things, and ask them about their life. How did you get into this? Why did you do it? How do you feel about it now? So I think there's a sort of human drama that's unique to organized crime, and a storytelling piece of it that really attracted me.
What's the most realistic mob movie? Is it Goodfellas? Is it Sopranos? Sopranos is not a movie, but what's the most realistic fictional depiction of the mob?
Sopranos is really realistic because I think what the Sopranos shows is how stressful and frustrating it is for the guys who were involved in it, right? We have this glamorized view of the mob as it's all back rooms and cigar smoking and planning hits. But for real, I think if you watch The Sopranos, and I just rewatched a couple episodes recently, you see how frustrated and stressed they all are, and they're all fighting over the same pieces of the pie and the same rackets. And that's really true when you see how mobsters really operate. It's a grind. It really is a grind, almost like a lot of other professions.
Yeah, as a successful mobster, the successful organization, almost like a successful large enterprise of any kind.
Yeah, I look at a lot of these guys, and I think that guy would have been successful if he was on Wall Street. He just happened to grow up in Bensonhurst or something. Right. And of course we have our Jersey piece of it. We had a guy who makes me think of Tony Soprano, named Angelo Prisco, who became the center of a New Jersey controversy. We ended up trying him for murder too and convicting him. But the thing that's so Jersey about him is we had his driver wired up, and there was a day when the driver had to drive Angelo from Fair Lawn to Atlantic City, which Jersey geography, that's long.
That's a long drive, yeah.
And Prisco took the whole time to give him Mob 101. He goes, here's the 5 families. We're the Genovese family. He goes,
You're like taking notes. This is
"Oh,
fantastic. It's
I
like a
mean,
primer.
The best part, Angelo goes, look, we're the Genovese family. We're the smartest one. We don't talk on tape. We don't shoot our mouth off. The reason the Gambinos got taken down was because John Gotti Sr. couldn't shut up and got caught on tape. And,
That's
As
awesome.
you're hearing this, what is the reaction in the room as you guys are listening?
well, we're not hearing it live,
Yeah.
but the next day, laughter, high-fiving.
And how do you know when you're listening in? I've always wondered, The Sopranos kind of alluded to this in an episode, but as you're listening in on a call and or in a conversation, it has to only be relevant and germane to what you're looking into, right? If somebody's wife comes in, or how do you know when to turn off the mic?
Right. So that applies to if you're on a phone wire, a wiretap.
Right.
The agents get sort of trained on that. It's called minimizing. You just have to use your judgment. If the wife comes in, you start talking about the kid's soccer game, you have to minimize, meaning you have to turn it off, and then you can listen back in 30 seconds later and see if they've changed topics. But if someone's wearing a wire for you, it's not physically a wire. I'm gesturing. It's not physically a wire anymore. It's much more sophisticated. But then you can get everything. You don't have to turn on and off because you have someone, the guy wearing the wire, who's consenting to it. So, gosh, I've listened to like 8-hour-long wiretaps where they're just sitting there watching 2 football games in a row, and it's so tedious.
You have to be the one to listen to it as the prosecutor,
No.
or you have an agent or somebody listening.
Good agents will tell you what's on it, but sometimes they'll write conversation about extortion, and you'll go, yeah, but it's a 6-hour tape.
Yeah.
So I had some good interns who did that too.
What's I hear the Italian mob kind of has a code of honor, for lack of a better word. I'm sure it's probably a really inappropriate word to use, but whereas like the Russian mob or the Yakuza or somebody, those guys are much more brutal. Like the Russian mob, I think, would not hesitate to kill you, the prosecutor, or worse, to dismember your entire family and leave you alive to suffer the consequences.
So they all have codes, but of course the Italian mafia, Cosa Nostra, they'll tell you the rules are only the rules until they're not. Right. Well, we're not supposed to deal in drugs, but a lot of them do.
Right.
Right. But yes, a lot of the newer and emerging organized crime groups are much more violent, much tougher. And I'll give you an example. The Genovese family, in another case I did, wanted to do home invasions on people who kept cash in the house, drug dealers, or including the TV show Orange County Choppers. Remember that, where they fix up motorcycles?
Yep.
So there was a rumor on the streets that they were and this is public. That they were keeping cash from merchandise sales in their house. So cash businesses. But what the Genovese family did was they basically subcontracted those robberies to Albanian gangsters. You know, the Albanian gangsters, a couple of them flipped, and they would say, yeah, because we're tougher and we're more willing to go in and zip tie someone and beat them up. But these Albanian gangsters are scary. I had a couple that cooperated with me, and they used to laugh at the Italians. Like, oh, these Italians, they got no heart. I remember one of them said to me, these Italians got no heart. I'll fight 10 of them at once. So the new groups are a little tougher and a little scarier. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of, how did they emerge? I mean, there's a vacuum because the Italian mob in New York at least kind of got broken up.
I mean, the Italian mob in New York is not all that violent anymore.
Right.
There hasn't been an agreed upon. There hasn't been a murder that I think we in law enforcement agree was a mob hit for several years now. But the Albanians, they're fighting for turf, and they're breaking into new businesses, new neighborhoods, Russians, Albanians. There's Asian gangs here in Manhattan, Chinatown, and they tend to be a little harder edged.
Interesting.
What's the most bizarre front that you've seen for any of these gangs?
Front. Okay, so good question. Someone just reminded me of this morning. There was a Gambino family gangster who made a fortune off of the fruit importation business. So he controlled the docks, including Newark and Brooklyn, and he took a piece, I guess it's not exactly a front, but he took a piece of every fruit shipment. And these are these huge barges that come in from South America. So he started off as a I think a Bensonhurst guy, but he ended up making a fortune off fruit importation. So it sounds not threatening, but you can make a fortune off it.
Tell us your 2 truths and a lie. You're going to try to, you said you're a horrible liar, so why don't we not look at you?
I really am. You can look at me. I wrote these down, though, because I need some cover here.
Okay, go ahead.
2 truths and a lie. So I've done themes here. It's a New Jersey theme.
I got it. I'm already way ahead of this. I can probably figure it out already.
And it's a musical theme.
I've got it covered, too. What kind of music?
You'll see.
All right.
Okay. Number 1.
I've gotten them all wrong, so I can only go up.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty much. I'm in a good place. I think I've gotten most of them.
All right, you're confident.
Go ahead.
Number 1. My first concert was in 1988 at the Atlantic City Steel Pier. It was the Beach Boys featuring special guest drummer John Stamos.
Okay.
Got it? Processed? Okay. Number 2, in 1989, I went to a Springsteen concert at the Brendan Byrne Arena. I held up a sign saying, I know all the words to Glory Days. Clarence Clemens glanced at me. I thought they were going to do the thing where they pull me on stage.
like Courtney Cox?
Like Courtney Cox. I was ready to do my Courtney Cox thing, but they did not.
Okay.
And then number 3 was in 1995 when I was at Rutgers in New Brunswick. I went to a Run DMC concert at the College Ave gym, but I only got in because I worked security.
All right. I'm going to right away say that the Stamos thing has to be real because I'm thinking that Stamos became a big deal when he was on Full House. And you said this is 1988 or 89, right? 88?
I think 87.
87, which I think Full House was already on. And I recall that he was playing with the Beach Boys at the time. So that stands to reason. I'm going to say the Run DMC thing is so preposterous that it has to be real. And so the Clarence Clemens one, although it's good, has to be fake. Don't tell us yet, Emily. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I was born in 1990.
Oh my God.
So
you never watched Full House?
Well, I'm seeing the remake on Netflix.
You are no longer 15, so that's not acceptable. We'll get to that later.
Fuller House.
Just checking it out. I felt like the second one was super specific. So I'm going to go with Run DMC.
Oh, good. I was worried you'd both get it. Springsteen is false.
I knew it. Yes. Got it. I feel
good. I just wanted to trick one of you.
My track record stands.
Mine does too.
That's right.
I have lost all.
I think I don't remember. I think I'm pretty much good. How was John Stamos?
John Stamos was great.
Wait a second. This is 1987? How old
Something like that. Yeah, I was 12 or so.
All right, that's an acceptable age.
I just remember I went with a friend of mine's parents took us. They had a house in Ocean City. And my friend who said, Mom, Dad, just don't act embarrassing, right? And this, the curtain goes up on the steel pier, and they both his parents just stood up and danced their faces off for the next 2 hours. And John Stamos, people went crazy. John Stamos was super hot back then.
Okay, back then.
I don't mean hot. I mean hot like
back then.
Famous.
John Stamos continues to be super hot. I don't want to hear the back then. He had a mullet back then, so I'm not sure about the super hot part of him. But. And what was up with working security for Run DMC? Was this during the Walk This Way period when they redid Walk This Way?
No, it was much later. I mean, Walk This Way was like 85, 86. This is when I was there, 94, 95.
Oh, okay.
So they played at the College Ave gym. It was an unbelievable concert. They didn't even take breaks. They went song into song into song, no breather. But they had this thing where if you were involved in student government, which I was at the time, you could get in, but you had to, and I'm making air quotes, work security. So they gave you like a windbreaker, and you had to stand there. You were supposed to stand with your back to the stage.
So wait,
I'm going to stop someone from rushing the stage.
you were bouncing at a DNC concert.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I know I look it, but but I ended up trying to stand off to the side of the stage as much as possible.
Could Run DMC not afford their own bouncers or their own security?
I really don't know. I'm sure they had real security there. I would guess that part of the deal was Rutgers said we'll provide some student security as well.
Well, and you were toughened up by your name being Elie at a young age. So to bring that full circle,
exactly right.
You could take down anybody.
Was there any part of the Springsteen story that's true? Did you actually ever go to a Springsteen concert?
No, that was an amalgam of various things I've probably fantasized. Oh yeah, I've been to Springsteen concerts. Yeah, but I've never held up a sign or been close to getting motioned out to stage.
You're a Jersey guy, and I think the answer is self-evident to any rational thinking person.
Okay.
But Springsteen or Bon Jovi?
Oh gosh, Springsteen. I mean, look, I like Bon Jovi, and I used to go with my friends in DC, and we would say, this is not an ironic trip, just so don't come with us if you're planning to go ironically to Bon Jovi. Like, I'm Slippery When Wet. That is my core demo for that.
Right.
But there's no comparison. Springsteen has so much more to it and more depth.
I got to tell you, I went to a Bon Jovi show, I want to say maybe about 15 years ago, at what was then, I think, Giants Stadium. I don't know what it's called now. And it was really bizarre because it was the early 2000s, and it was like the land that time forgot. And all the people at the mall from 1986, they used to hang out with me at the Quaker Bridge Mall outside of Princeton, New Jersey. Apparently, I don't know where they got their perms that day, but it was like, it was back during the Slippery When Wet. It's like you got transformed back to New Jersey circa 1985, 1986.
The problem with Bon Jovi, this may be blasphemy, but if you take away their top 3 or 4 or 5 songs, there's not a lot left. Springsteen, you could take away his top 20 songs. And
He'd still be amazing. I know.
Yeah, so that's...
I had this argument consistently with Phil Murphy, who's now the governor of New Jersey, who actually is very good friends with Bon Jovi. And if you ask him, he'll say he prefers Bon Jovi, but he's originally from Massachusetts, so we'll cut him a break.
That says something about his New Jersey bona fides right there.
I'm gonna not say anything about that. But I cannot thank you enough. I actually learned a tremendous amount. I had no idea about the mob stuff. That's so fascinating. And I actually had no idea about most of the legal stuff to do with the subpoenas.
I know. I'm really excited for my dad to listen to this because, so I'm Italian, and my dad, during one Christmas about 10 years ago, sat me down like, we're going to watch The Godfather together. And so I think
Was this like an Italian tradition? Like you guys?
It is, because he would always mention it, and I'd be like, I don't know what you mean. And then he sat me down, we watched it, and I think he's going to so enjoy your stories on this podcast.
Will you come back if and when
Anytime.
there are massive indictments?
Anytime.
We need to work through somebody who actually knows what they're talking about. I'm glad we finally got somebody to give us the skinny on it who doesn't.
My
who does
pleasure.
actually know how it works.
Thank you for
Elie
having
Honig.
me.
Thanks so much. Bye. Emily, that was an absolutely fascinating episode, and I'm so grateful for Elie for coming in, or Elliot, as we learned today, which hopefully his wife will listen to this episode and maybe find out something about her husband she did not know before, including the fact that he had several aliases that he went by.
Do you have any aliases, AKA?
I actually do have an alias. I didn't know that you have to put that in your marriage certificate. I do, because my, as you know, my real name is Julia, not Julie. Julie is just what I go by. But when I was born, because there's no J's in the Russian language, it's really Yulia. So although my legal name was changed to Julia, I was born Yulia, which I'm not sure people knew about. So there you go. How about you?
I don't, but I actually remember learning that because when we did the clapback, I thought someone had misspelled your name, and then you're like, no,
they didn't. Nope, that's definitely it. What's making you salty this week?
It actually has to do with that. It's poor grammar. It's when reading this Donald Trump letter about Khashoggi, the White House official response, I wish the White House would hire my 5th grade grammar teacher, because the exclamation points, the use of commas, and run-on sentences is appalling.
Well, you know that grammar was a big running theme when we worked on the clapback together, and it continues to be. I don't understand what is so hard about writing properly.
Didn't Trump say that he's not using a lawyer, he's handwriting all of his answers for the Mueller's questions?
I can't wait. Can you imagine if you're Robert Mueller and you're looking at this, and if he really did handwrite this?
Do you think Trump, however, will use that and say, oh, the comma was in the wrong place, you're misinterpreting it?
He might. Do you think it's also in 240 characters or less, every answer, or do you think he's capable of writing in complete paragraphs?
I don't know.
Yeah. I'll tell you what's making me salty, and it's been making me salty for a while. So I think maybe a couple of years ago, I think it was on Outnumbered, which is a show, as you know, that I used to do at Fox. I had said that I thought it was potentially time for Nancy Pelosi and the Democratic leadership of the House to step down. And I said this, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And I said this because I thought, okay, they've been around a long time to give somebody newer an opportunity. But I'll tell you what's making me salty. I'm tired of people going after Nancy Pelosi now. Aside from Donald Trump, she did more than anybody else to bring Democrats to the promised land this year and get them the majority. And she did it. She was at the helm. She was the team captain. She was the quarterback, however you want to phrase it. That's the only football analogy you'll hear me use, because I don't know anything about football. And the fact that Nancy Pelosi now is being challenged by these people after everything that she did to get the House back kind of is offensive to me. And what I don't get is, I hate to get on the moral high horse about her being a woman, but why is it that nobody says this about Chuck Schumer or Mitch McConnell, who are probably around the same age that she is and have been around, and not so much for Schumer, but McConnell's been around a long time. Why is it that it's time for her to go? I mean, she did everything that Democrats could have asked her to do, which is she got them the majority. So I think let's calm down. Let's give Nancy Pelosi another term, see how she does, and then revisit this again in 2 years. But I really am getting a little annoyed with this anti-Nancy Pelosi sentiment.
I think you're exactly right. I think it's about the vilification of women. It's easier to do that because she's this woman, and you should just be like, oh, she's being mean, she's being evil.
And Alexandra Petri, the Washington Post, who's great, and I highly recommend people read her. She's kind of does this satirical column, had this great column, which I'll tweet out. But she said basically that there's this sentiment, oh, I'm not anti-woman, I'm just anti this particular woman. Hillary Clinton, Nancy Pelosi. It's not that I don't want powerful women in power. In fact, of course I support women being powerful, just not this particular powerful woman. And they say that about every powerful woman that's in charge. It's kind of really annoying. And maybe if you stand back and take a look at it, really it is a problem with the fact that they are women who are powerful and not just with them individually. So what is it about her that irritates people so much on both sides of the aisle, other than the fact that she is a woman? It's been going on since before the election, and now shortly after the election it continues. So I hope it stops. Cut it out. Leave Nancy Pelosi alone. All right. Thank you so much for listening. We will see you next week.
Sounds good.